Commission resumes. Before I remind Mr. Hendricks that he's still bound by his affirmation, I want to know from you, Mr. Semenya, whether it's necessary for me to do so. Do you have further questions for him?
2 or 3 questions, Chair.
Mr. Budlender, I know there are time constraints that are pressing. Shall I allow him to ask the 2 or 3 questions now, or shall we stand it over until you've finished?
If you ask me my personal preference, my personal preference would be that I could start now with Mr. De Rover, because it's now 9:15 already.
You happy with that, Mrs. Semenya?
Perhaps I can also announce that leading off Mr. De Rover won't be 15 minutes. It would be like 5 minutes as well.
That's something to bear in mind when it happens. Thank you. Yes, so you may stand down for the moment, Mr. Hendricks.
If it's really only 1 or 2 or 3 questions, let's get it over with.
All right. Mr. De Rover, you're still bound by... Sorry, Mr. Hendricks, sorry. I made that mistake yesterday, I'm sorry. You're still bound by your affirmation. That light be turned off for the moment. It's all right for the rest of you, but it's right in my eyes, and I find it rather disconcerting. Obviously, we'll have to make a plan later on when the projector is used, but for the moment it's not in use, and I prefer if it were turned off.
Did this have my start?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Semenya.
Mr. Hendricks, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I tried to obtain information in relation to the use of the water cannon. I'm told the functions it has, it's a short pulse with 10 liter per shot, a long pulse with 20 liter per shot, and a continuous spray. There is no recognition of what you call jet spray.
I'm not referring to the spray. I'm referring to the 2 ways of the 2 manners of providing the water to protesters or whatever, or to the people. That's what I'm referring to. I call that a jet stream.
The 10 liter per shot or the 20 liter per shot, is that what you call jet spray?
Yep. That's what I call a jet stream. What you said, providing for a few seconds a few liters of water intended to reach or hit a person.
Can I ask that we, Chair, have a statement of Tshepiso Isaac Sekhaule? It's a new exhibit.
Has the witness seen it?
The witness has not seen it, but it's a very short statement. It's 1 paragraph I'm interested in, really, Chair.
Quadruple, I take it there's no objection, Mr. Leader. Quadruple T4, statement of, how do you spell the
Sekhaule would be Segaole.
Surname?
That's Sekhaule. The name is Tshepiso, Tshepiso, Isaac. Tshepiso, Tshepiso, Isaac.
His statement will be quadruple T4.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. The operator has it. Maybe they'll just flight it on the screen. But this is an individual who was an operator of the Northwest Cannon, Mr. Hendricks. What he does say, and maybe this is what you are referring to in paragraph 3, I operated from my operator's control panel, and Warrant Officer Malwetse operated from the driver's control panel. Warrant Officer Malwetse and I, that is Constable Sekhaule, attended a water cannon course at Benoni SAPS College. We never received any training on how to use the recorder that is installed in the water cannon. It is the recorder that was a problem, not the operation of the water cannon. Do you have any information different?
Well, not for the moment. But you can see from this statement as well that the people in the water cannon were not trained to use the video camera, the recorder. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Well, I think that's a lack of training then.
Those are the questions I have.
That's obvious, but the question is whether it has a bearing on the use of the cannon for firing water at people is concerned. Whether he was adequately trained for that, we don't know that. But
those are all the questions I have.
All your questions. Thank you.
Can I comment on that, sir, or no?
Yes, you can comment, of course.
Yeah. The best way to go then ahead, if I may make a recommendation to the Commission, is to see what a water cannon can do when it's used properly.
Perhaps arrangements can be made for a water cannon to be taken to Marikana on Monday, and while we're at the inspection, we can see. I don't know whether that's practical, but if it's practical, it'll take a few minutes, and we can fire water at the copy and see what happens. We can get with somebody to stand in the way of the cannon and see, like Mr. Mpofu, see whether it pushes him back 20 meters.
Can we nominate?
we nominate Mr. Mpofu.
I think what could happen is the legal representatives can draw lots, as was done in the Bible when the 12th apostle was chosen, and we see on whom the lot falls.
And perhaps with a trained team in the water cannon then?
Yes, of course. All right, that's your recommendation. That's your evidence. Thank you very much. You're excused from further attendance. On the usual basis that if you have to come back, we don't have to serve a subpoena. I don't think that will be likely, but if you're prepared to give that undertaking, you'll be excused.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for giving us.
Chairperson, if I can just add, there is in fact a statement from Warrant Officer Fourie, who identifies what training was given, not to Mr. Sechwale, who was in the Northwest Water Cannon, but to the operators of the Johannesburg water cannon, that specifies exactly what training was given.
Well, we can look at that after Mr. Budlender has had a chance to cross-examine Mr. de Rover. Mania?
I beg leave to call Mr. de Rover.
Wildman, you're standing up. Have you got something to say? You want to exchange seats with
we thought we should move.
The legal representatives of the human rights, yes, well, whomever. Yes, Mrs. Menon. When the witness seat is vacated, your witness will sit in it. Call Mr. de Rover.
I do, Chair.
Mr. de Rover, would you please stand? Would you please stand? Are you prepared to take the oath, or do you wish to affirm?
The oath, please.
The oath. Do you swear that the evidence you will give before this commission will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Would you please raise your right hand and say, I swear so help me God?
I swear so help me God.
Please be seated.
Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. Menon.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. de Rover, you have been engaged in the proceedings around the Marikana inquiry by the South African Police Service, is that right?
That is correct, Mr. Semenya.
And might I just show you two documents? The first is already an exhibit before the Commission, and it is exhibit FFF11. And on page 22 of that document, you will see a signature there. Please tell us if you recognize it.
Yes, that is my signature.
And it is a statement dated 8th day of March of 2013.
That is correct.
So too, you will find a document, exhibit FFF11A. Mine is unsigned, but I would invite you to look at the document, and if it is your statement, to confirm that it is so. Exhibit FFA, a written supplementary statement of Mr. Cees de Rover on page 1. That's the one. Let's do page 1 first, so that Mr. de Rover can see what is in the tram lines there.
That is my statement.
That is your statement.
Yes.
You confirm its contents.
I do confirm.
So too the contents of Exhibit FFF1, 11.
Yes, I do.
Might I invite Mr. de Rover to tell us your background, professional background that is.
Chairperson, I will not repeat that what is already included in my first statement to save time. Maybe just to add a few elements to it. My career now spans 35 years. 14 of which in the Dutch police, and a slight overlap of 2 years where there is an international career that now runs in excess of 20 years. I have a master's degree of business administration in addition to my formal policing qualifications with a specialization in organizational change. I have a master's degree of public international law with a focus on human rights and humanitarian law. The last 22 years have seen me in close to 70 different countries around the world on all continents, including South Africa, where I have worked closely with police, security forces, and armed forces. Surely at instances in matters relating to use of force and firearms and public order management, which seem to be of particular interest to this Commission, but more generally on issues of task organization and task implementation. I've worked extensively with the United Nations. I've been a staff member of the United Nations in 1995 when the Department of Peacekeeping Operations placed me in Burundi as a special advisor to the Special Representative of the Secretary General. I've worked extensively with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and in fact, where Professional Training Series number 5 is concerned, the manual that covers human rights and policing, I'm one of the 2 authors responsible for that publication. I've been part of many expert working groups of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and I routinely assist mandate holders, special rapporteurs on thematic issues. I particularly like to mention Professor Philip Alston, who held the mandate that is currently being held by Professor Haynes. In that capacity of working for the UN, I've worked for several of the UN specialized agencies, including the United Nations Development Programme, for whom I did the needs assessment, validation and programming of the needs of Rwanda to re-establish a national policing capability following the genocide in 1994. I've worked extensively with the High Commissioner for Refugees, most notably on a project in Indonesia that ran from 2001 till the middle of 2003, and that was aimed at bringing human rights training to the Indonesian National Police and introduce community policing, as well as restructure and retrain Indonesia's mobile brigades, which are their riot policing variant. The Indonesian police is in personnel strength close to 600,000, so it's about 3 times as large as SABC, and its riot policing component counts 42,000 personnel.
The population of Indonesia, how does it compare with ours?
I think it's about 4 times as large, in excess of 200 million people. I have worked extensively for the International Committee of the Red Cross. I was brought in there initially to produce the book To Serve and to Protect, Human Rights and Humanitarian Law for Police and Security Forces. This book, first published in 1998, now knows a second edition that was published in March this year. The original book has been translated into 36 languages and forms for many police forces an important reference work. It's actually to date still one of the best-selling books the organization has at its disposal. Once that book was complete, I was placed in the position of being ICRC's first coordinator for police and security forces, because the organization realized the need to not just engage the armed bearers that are part of the armed forces, but that it would also be in interest to engage with the armed bearers that are part of police and security forces. So I established the strategy, the methodology, I recruited the people, and I established the practices. Today, in that branch of ICRC's activities, 36 people have a full-time job. And it forms a core part of that organization's activities. In 1999, I was recruited by the Australian Defence Force, and at the request of the Chief of the Army in Australia, I deployed with Australian troops to Dili in East Timor, where the Australian-led intervention forces established the first steps on the path to self-rule for the East Timorese. I worked as an advisor for General Cosgrove and was particularly tasked to look at issues of public order and to look at issues of treatment of prisoners and condition of detention, and conducted the necessary negotiations with the International Committee of the Red Cross, who routinely visit prisoners in such circumstances. As a consequence of the public order recommendations, I conducted extensive training both in Dili and in Australia at various barracks locations for troops that were scheduled to rotate into East Timor, and gave them what essentially are basic law enforcement skills and abilities to counter possible situations on the ground. And I was drawn into the security arrangements for the Sydney Olympics. So everything that had to do with the military's role in securing the Sydney Olympics, I was one of the architects of what actually then happened on the ground, including creating and establishing and giving the Army the capability of having 2 extraction and recovery teams, which essentially are surveillance teams of 8 that work generally in plain clothes and can mix with a crowd and can signal and identify early signs of troublemakers and actually physically take troublemakers out. Around the Olympics, and this has never seen the light of day, but those teams actually arrested 3 individuals, managed to identify, follow, isolate, and arrest people that carried on them items that would have permitted an Atlanta-type bombing to occur in Sydney. But because of those interventions, that never eventuated. At a later stage, I have established in 1998 the organization Equity International. At that time, I was working more than 6 years in policing and human rights, and frankly, I experienced a disappointment, because many times I was asked to go to a country and stand up in front of police officials and cite international law as it relates to law enforcement practice. And I would always have to stop myself at pointing out what their responsibilities are. And at times people would raise their hand and say, okay, I understand that I can't torture to solicit information, and you say I need to use ethical interviewing techniques. Can you teach me ethical interviewing techniques? And I would have to say, yes, I could, but I'm not allowed to. So my personal experience was that training courses of that nature only add to frustration, because you do not add into the mix the ability for people to translate the standard into operational practice. There is no point in pointing out what a police responsibility is if you can't say how it should be operationalized.
All right, we'll have an opportunity to amplify.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that we cover this aspect before the cross-examination starts. Before compiling the statements you have, what did you do coming into the country and after receiving your mandate?
Chairperson, it's probably good to point out that I was outside South Africa when Marikana happened. And of course, I saw the news, or at least I saw the news broadcasting that little bit that sells news and that makes news interesting. And I was horrified. I'd never...
The question was asked, what did you read and look at in order to prepare yourself for your testimony? You'll have an opportunity to expand on these other points later.
Okay.
But we have a particular concern that Advocate Budlender should be able to cross-examine you in the time available.
Fair enough.
Did you have access to the terrain?
Let me set out how I approached the work that I have done. I've used as a normative framework international law, applicable treaty law, like treaties that South Africa is a state party to and that could give guidance. I've used soft law. I've used all those instruments that talk about what law enforcement responsibility is. I've used humanitarian law.
I think it's clear from the report, if I may say this, that all the things that you took into account and the authorities and so forth to which you referred, I don't think that's what Mr. Semenya wants. He really wants to know, I think, as far as the evidence is concerned, have you read the transcript? Have you read statements? Have you looked at video clips?
Yeah, but
you can just explain that in a sentence to be helpful.
I will get to that, Chair, with your permission to explain that I can say I did that, but if I don't add to that the context...
We'll take your word for it for the time being, and when you've been cross-examined, you'll get an opportunity.
Okay.
You were rather concerned about time for reasons I think have been explained to you. Mr. Semenya?
I had access to all the documents that pertain to the Commission, that includes transcripts, that includes statements, that include physical evidence, and I had access to SABC members that were present on the day, and I spoke, I think, to most of those.
Take it you went to Marikana.
I went to Marikana on several occasions.
Yes.
Yeah, I went to Marikana on several occasions.
And were there any attempts you are involved in some reconstruction of how the events would have unfolded on various days with members?
Particularly with regards to scene 2, yes.
Those are the questions we have for the witness.
Thank you, Mr. Semenya. Mr. Budlender?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. de Rover.
Good morning, Mr. Budlender.
You've just, well, let me take a step back. In Exhibit FFF11, your first statement, you say that you commenced your work on behalf of the SAPS on the 28th of February last year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Before the 28th of February, other than seeing television news, did you have any opportunity to review any of the evidence relevant to Marikana?
No.
Then your statement is dated the 8th of March, your first statement, the 8th of March 2013. So you had 8 days between the time when you commenced work and you delivered your first statement.
That's correct.
And you've explained that in your statement that that was a limitation. At that time, you had a time limitation. At that time, the information you had available to you, as I understand it, is, well, perhaps you can tell us, let me not put words in your mouth. At the time that you made your first statement, what information did you have available to you?
At that time, I had obviously what was available to the Commission at that time, and I had the statements of the SABC members involved, plus the meetings that I had with individual sub members. But in addition, I had my own faculties to look at the Marikana incident and to basically conduct my own research and try and give an investigation structure to what happened at Marikana prior to, during, and after.
I don't want to interrupt you, Mr. de Rover, so if I do, please stop me. But I just want to understand what, I understand you applied your knowledge and your experience to the information you received. What I'm interested in is what information had you received at that stage? You say you had meetings with SABC members, you had statements of SABC members. Which of, did you read all of that in those 8 days?
I read all of that in that 8 days.
And the transcript of the evidence given up to that time, did you read all of that also in those 8 days?
No.
And you didn't have a chance to look at the exhibits, I take it, during those 8 days?
Not in the detail that you are looking at that here.
No, I appreciate that. So then, would it be fair to say that the main source for the first statement was statements of SABC members and meetings with SABC members, and I don't know whether you also went out and had a look at the scene over that period.
Yeah.
So it was a site inspection, the statements of SABC members, and interviews with SABC members. Would those be your sources at that time?
With, of course, in there, and I can't pinpoint exactly which parts now of commission proceedings, but of course more than that, to contextualize what happened at Marikana.
Well, could you give the commission some indication of what material from the commission's proceedings you had access to before you made your first statement?
Transcripts that I think I had a selection of transcripts of people that had appeared at that time from, as I recall correctly, from NAM and from AMCU. And I, of course, had access to any media report that was published in that period.
Right. And then you went on and you prepared your subsequent statement in May 2013, or you finalized it on the 1st of May 2013, where you had, again, access to SABC members, you had their statements, you had access to the transcript, you had the benefit of visits to the site. Are there any other sources of information which you relied on at that stage?
Again, I used, in addition to what you have said, I used, and that's what I was trying to explain before, that I used sources of international law and domestic law. I looked at national legislation as it relates to public protest in South Africa. So,
sorry to interrupt you. I'm not talking, I understand you made normative judgments based on that expertise.
Yeah.
At that stage, I'm interested only in the factual information which you obtained.
Yeah.
The factual information are the sources of factual information, as I understand it, are
Yeah.
those I've listed. SABC statements, interviews with members of SABC, transcript of the evidence, or parts of the transcript of the evidence, and visits to see for yourself.
Plus, of course, the exhibits of the commission that existed then to date, plus the statements of the other experts, plus the questioning that had happened at that stage of people from SABC that had appeared before the commission.
Right. Now, I appreciate that. Now, I'm sure you'll agree that an expert's opinion is only as good as the information on which he bases it. If the information is unreliable or incorrect, then the opinion may be unreliable.
I think if you want a precise opinion on a precise incident or occurrence particular to you, then of course you are right. But if you look, and I've, like frankly, if I see yesterday that Marikana can be made to hinge on the movement of one Nyala, then I worry, because I don't think that will ever provide you the answers that you are looking for. So I know that there is concern possibly or disagreement, and I accept that with findings that I made, but I've tried to actually offer to the Commission, and of course not being able to be led in chief undermines that a little bit. But what I was seeking to also do is to perhaps offer what is referred to as contradiction, or to challenge you to look another way than just in that micro detail.
I understand that. My question is that if an expert's opinion is based on unreliable or incorrect information, then the opinion itself may be unreliable. Do you accept that?
Of course.
Yes. Have you previously given evidence as an expert witness in a trial or in a commission like this?
No.
I take it you agree, I'm sure you agree, that an expert should be objective and unbiased.
Yes.
Yes. Now, I want to look at, you've told us the sources from which you obtained the information on which you relied. Did it occur to you that there might be some other useful sources from which you could have obtained, as you put it, contradictory information?
Please clarify.
Well, for example, let's go to FFF11A, paragraph 24. That's your supplementary statement. Paragraph 24. You have it? It's on page 13. You say, it is on this basis that I am uneasy about claims of the involved unions that the actions of their members were completely beyond their control. The unions support their members and facilitate the protest for wage increases of their members. They take their payments in the form of union dues. They take part in negotiations on behalf of their members. They regularly address their members. They cannot simply walk away from any responsibility for what took place on the 16th of August 2012 when negotiations broke down, stating that there is nothing more that they can do. Now, did you seek to interview anybody from AMCU or NUM to put this proposition to them?
No.
Are you aware that Mr. Matunjwa, on 2 occasions on the 16th of August, went to the Kopi and pleaded with the strikers to lay down their arms and leave the Kopi?
Yes.
What more do you think AMCU should have done?
I think still, that, and it's, if you pinpoint it on that day, maybe there is nothing more to do. But I am quite aware that what produced at Marikana is in part a consequence of a rivalry between unions and unions vying for majority membership. Now, I think that responsibility for action should be exercised when it can make a difference, and that you can point and say, well, on that day there was nothing more he could do. I may well agree with it, but I would actually say that responsibility should be acted upon before the issue becomes one of no options left.
Mr. De Rover, you're criticizing the conduct of AMCU and you're holding them in part responsible for the deaths. Now I'm asking you what you say they should have done that they didn't do.
I've heard various...
Chair, object. I don't see anywhere where Mr. De Rover is saying AMCU is responsible for the deaths.
No, Chair, I think the context is clear, but the witness can answer for himself. He's a very experienced man.
Mr. De Rover, do you say that part of the responsibility for the deaths rests with AMCU? Is that your evidence? Is that what you are saying in the paragraph to which Mr. Budlender has referred you? It's paragraph 24 of your supplementary statement.
I think what I need to say at this stage is that Marikana represents an unraveling system, and I've seen in this commission evidence being presented and arguments being built. For example, that a refusal of Lonmin to talk to strikers makes them responsible for the death, or as you put it now in this question. And what I see is this drive to look for operator failure.
You haven't answered the question. The question is a simple one. do you say that part of the responsibility for the deaths rests with AMCU?
Yes.
Thank you.
If you want to link the two together and you want to look at the process in that way, that a failure to engage at an earlier stage or make yourself available at a stage that it could be making a difference, or a failure to conduct the business of the union in such a way that it doesn't propagate violence or tolerate that, and that it doesn't breed animosity. I think that there were ample opportunities before, because the strikes in the Platinum Belt did not start in August of that year.
Mr. De Rover, you say that AMCU are partly responsible for the deaths. I'm asking you specifically, what do you say they should have done that they didn't do, or what did they do that they shouldn't have done, which contributed, which was a causal factor in the deaths? In the shootings by members of the South African Police Service.
I don't know if that additional qualification is required, but...
Well, that's my question. What do you say that AMCU did, which they shouldn't have done, or didn't do that they should have done, which was a causal factor in the killing of 34 people by the police on the 16th of August?
I think that AMCU, as an organization, should have exercised better control over its members. There were deaths at Marikana before the police was involved. There was wanton destruction of property. I have a list of case dockets that between February and the 1st of August of 2012 runs in excess of 100 cases opened of destruction of property, grievous bodily harm, murder and attempted murder. And all of those are linked to mine strikes and union rivalry. I just think that if you run an organization that has a public character, you have a responsibility towards your members, but also towards the general public.
All right, that's your answer. Do you also blame the NUM in part for the deaths on the 16th of August?
Yes.
And what should they have done that they didn't do, or what didn't they do that they should have done that led to the deaths of 34 people on the 16th of August?
As a majority union, they obviously did not represent or share or wish to represent or share the concerns of those that were demonstrating at the copy. Now, if your system of collective bargaining is such that you only do business with the one that holds the majority, you force people into militancy because numbers become important. And if on top of that, NUM, who had at that time the majority, do not represent that group, you breed militancy, because people will not feel themselves represented, not heard and not listened to. And what alternative but to take a stance and to stand up do you leave open to them?
I understand that. That's, with respect, not an answer to my question. We know that the strikers had lost confidence in the NUM, that NUM president tried to speak to them and they weren't interested in listening to him. Now, what do you say they did or that they shouldn't have done, or should have done that they didn't do, that led to the deaths of 34 people on the 16th of August?
If I, and you will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong, but my understanding of what has been presented before the Commission is that on the 10th of August, the strikers marched to the NUM offices. And I take that march, and I've seen the footage of it, as an attempt to draw attention to their plight and to engage NUM. There wasn't anything hostile in that. There wasn't anything aggressive. I think it was a genuine question for attention. And that attention wasn't given. On the 11th, when they went back, there is that allegation that shots were fired from the NUM offices into the group that approached. And that has triggered subsequent responses, and that is when matters went violent.
And that led to the police shooting 34 people on the 16th of August.
I'm sure we will get to that, but, you know, the problem that I have with those reasonings is that you're hinting at what I call that unraveling system, and I will get an opportunity to clarify that. There are relationships at work that, when put in sequence under the conditions as they happened at Marikana, produced that unimaginable result. Now, it's far more interesting to look at the system that permitted to produce that in first instance, before you come to the point where you judge the responses as they happened at scene 1 and scene 2. And I'm happy to engage with you on those as well. But before doing that, I would like to also be able to point out that there are bigger forces at work here, because my concern is, even if you would accept that Marikana was without precedent, and I know that already some people struggle to accept that, if the least you need to recognize that it is a precedent, and that if you do not alter reality that led to Marikana, it will happen again. That's just a matter of time.
Mr. De Rover, do you consider that the conduct of the South African Police Service is partly to blame for the shootings, for the killings at scene 1?
Yes.
Right. Now, did you interview South African Police Service members who were critical of the conduct of the SAPS?
Yes.
Who were they, and in what respects were they critical?
Do you really want me to give you the names of the people that were critical?
Yes.
Okay. They go from the National Commissioner right down to the operational.
Well, let's start
command.
with the National Commissioner. In what respects was the National Commissioner critical of the conduct of the SAPS?
I think that on the outcome of the operation, the way the operation evolved on the ground and could not be controlled, she had serious concerns, and those concerns have led to her presentation yesterday before the Portfolio Committee to seek and redress.
What criticism did the National Commissioner make of the conduct of the South African Police Service at Marikana?
I think...
Not what you think, what she told you.
She asked me to assist subs with establishing what went wrong and why, and to seek the remedies to avoid this from happening again.
I'm sure she did, but I'm asking you, what criticism did the National Commissioner make to you of the conduct of the SAPS at Marikana?
I don't think that she voiced any particular one that I can give you as a quote and that you can cross-reference with her. But
well, you told the Commission that she was critical of the...
Yeah.
From the National Commissioner down, she was critical of the conduct of the SAPS. I'm asking you to say how. In what manner was she critical?
In the conversations I have had with her, I think she has a great concern for the outcome and wants to understand how it can be prevented or how it can be explained.
I'm sure that's so. I don't doubt that for a moment. But that's not an answer to the question. The question is, in what manner was the National Commissioner critical of the conduct of the SAPS at Marikana?
I cannot be more specific than I have been.
Well, it's not a matter, Mr. De Rover, of not being specific. You actually haven't answered the question.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, was the Provincial Commissioner critical of the conduct of the SAPS at Marikana?
Yes.
In what manner, what respects was she critical of the conduct of the SAPS at Marikana?
In terms of organization and communication.
Can you explain that further? What did she say the SAPS did wrong? Because that's what you were trying to find out.
Yeah.
Did the SAPS do something wrong? The Provincial Commissioner gave you an answer. What was her answer?
The answers of the Provincial Commissioner went to the running of the job and the communication between the different stakeholders, the concern that with the interactions that happened in the job the different parties that were represented and present there, plus the lateral connections of people ringing on mobile phones, created a reality that was very difficult to manage.
Sorry, that's what she told you?
Yes.
She didn't tell the Commission that?
I can't help that.
In what respect was Brigadier Carlitz critical of the conduct of the SAPS at Marikana? Or was he not critical?
I think his frustration was with communication on the ground, the possibility to relay information and to get updates as to what was actually happening on the ground.
Thank you. In what respects was General, if any, was General Annandale critical of the conduct of the SAPS at Marikana?
It's the same thing. Their inability to, at all times, be informed of what was transpiring on the ground.
Right. Well, let's come to that. Incidentally, just before I come to that, have you consulted at all with Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak or Lieutenant Colonel Merafe?
I have consulted with Lieutenant Colonel Merafe. I have not consulted with Vermaak.
Why not with Vermaak?
I have his statements, and I have the transcripts of his evidence. I have never had the chance or made the decision to sit down with him.
I'm sorry, you've never had the?
I have never had the opportunity to sit down with him.
Did you ask for an opportunity to sit down?
No, I did not.
You're talking about, you mentioned the communication problems. Let me come back to that in due course.
Before we move on, did you speak to General Mpembe?
Yes, I did.
Did he have critical comments?
I think General Mpembe's frustration is with particularly the events on the 13th of August. And
I understand that. That's a valid reply.
Yes.
But as far as the events of the 16th are concerned, did he have any critical comments that he communicated to you about what happened on the 16th?
No.
No. Concerns about the 13th?
I think I've had several meetings with General Mpembe, and I'm not an expert on trauma, but I think he still carries a legacy of what happened on that day, and I think he has a narrative for what happened, what occurred, and is questioning whether if he had been somewhere else or positioned himself somewhere else rather than to be walking behind the group when they diverted from the railway line, if him being in another position than the one he opted for, it would have been possible to avert what actually happened then.
The point is to me was whether he had critical comments. Are you suggesting he was only criticizing himself because he was in the wrong position, or did he have more critical comments to make than that?
He cites the discussions that he had with Colonel Merafe, and it's why I went to see Colonel Merafe to get his side of that story, because it appears from what both say that they did have an argument about what action was to be preferred at that stage and at that moment in time.
You referred to the problem of communication, and I want to take you to the evidence leaders' interrogatories, which, Commissioners, is document 8 in your bundle. I think.
We have an index that says it's one, but one
flag,
in fact...
Flag one in your bundle. Flag one in your bundle.
Yeah. What is flag one in my bundle is actually Colonel Scott's statement. I see it now. It's over. Behind Colonel Scott's statement in my bundle is the interrogatory. Is it an exhibit? Is it an exhibit yet? Does it
No,
have
it's
to
not
be
an exhibit yet, Chair. The Human Rights Commission have prepared a list of exhibits. They could be used their number. Their number is quadruple U 2.4.
Quadruple U.
It will fall into a sequence which they're going to use.
2.4. That's evidence leaders interrogatories.
Yes. Now, Mr. De Rover, could you go to page 6 of that document, paragraphs 10 and 11. Paragraph 10, you were asked the following question. When you prepared Triple F11 and Triple F11A, were you informed that at 16:03, before scene 2 commenced, Brigadier Pretorius, in charge of the JOC, sent an SMS message to Mr. Molatedi at IPID stating, having operation at Wonderkop, bad, bodies, please prepare your members as going to be bad, or that there was any communication between Brigadier Pretorius and IPID at the time, and you said no, you said this was the first you'd heard of this. And then the next question, paragraph 11, was when you prepared F11 and 11A, we informed that from 16:05, before scene 2 commenced, Brigadier Pretorius had a series of telephone calls with Captain Lust, who was at scene 1 and informed her what had happened there, and you said no, this was the first time you were told about this. Yes. Now, we know that Brigadier Pretorius was in charge of the JOC. She was the manager of the JOC. Yes. Could you just speak a bit louder?
Yes.
So we know that the person in charge of the JOC knew shortly after 4 o'clock and well before scene 2 happened that there had been shootings and there was a bad situation at scene 1. But you weren't told that when you prepared your reports. I understand that.
Mm.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
What it means is that however bad the communication system was, the person in charge of the JOC knew well before scene 2 happened of the bad incident and the shootings that had happened at scene 1. Is that correct?
If I take that...
If you take that at face value.
Yeah, at face value, that would appear. You know, there would have been at least, what is it, 5 minutes or 6 minutes?
Yes, from 16:03.
Yeah.
At least.
Before scene 2 started.
Yes. Now, if you had known that when you prepared your report, would that have influenced your opinion on the failure to call a halt to the operation before scene 2 happened?
No, because I think I said already in my first statement that I believe a halt should have been called. And the fact that it didn't happen can be led back to part of unraveling systems and issues that in and of themselves might not be fatal, but when you sequence them, produce a result.
I understand that.
Yes.
You criticize, you say that scene 2, there should have been a halt before scene 2.
Yes.
But your understanding at that time was that the JOC didn't know about scene 1.
No, my understanding at that time was that the JOC could not access the commanders via the radio. And I don't know if the fact that Brigadier Pretorius may have known at 16:03, I don't even know what it exactly then is that she knew. But if at that stage there is a problem with the radios, the fact that the JOC would know, but they are unable to reach people on the ground at that time, that still leaves that part of the problem.
Are you aware of, sorry, Mr. De Rover, are you aware of any evidence that the JOC attempted to call a halt to the operation after scene 1?
No, I'm not.
No. Right. Then can we carry on to... Can we then, in a related matter, did you ask them why they didn't try to call a halt to the operations?
Yes.
And what did they say?
They said they were unable to contact people on the ground. And
no, Mr. De Rover, you just said you're not aware that they made any attempts to halt the operation. So they can't have, if you aren't aware that they made any attempt, then how can they...
I think there's two different things. You asked me if they made an attempt.
Sorry, my first question was, are you aware of any evidence that they made an attempt?
No.
Then how can the communication problems be a cause of the failure to call a halt if they didn't try?
Well, I would take the inference of the reference to the radio problem that they would have tried but found that the radios weren't working.
Did anyone tell you that?
Yes,
They told you that they wanted to try, but the radios weren't working.
yes.
Who told you that?
Annandale and Scott.
So Annandale and Scott told you they were aware that scene 1 had happened, and they tried to stop scene 2, but the communications wouldn't happen, wouldn't work.
No, they did not say that they were aware of scene 1.
Did they,
They
say
did,
that?
they
Sorry.
did say that they lost for a period of time contact with people on the ground, with
Did
the
they say
operational
that?
command.
Did they?
Budlender,
Sorry.
You mustn't interrupt the witness.
I apologize.
He's giving an answer. You must let him finish.
I apologize. Did they tell you that they wanted to call a halt, but they were unable to do so?
No, that was never said.
Right. Okay. Also around that issue, can you go to paragraph 8 of that interrogatory? That's on page 6. The question is asked, when you prepared Triple F11 and Triple F11A, were you informed that the firing of R5 rifles at scene 1 was audible through the police radio to members of the JOC and to other commanders on the ground? And your answer is, I am not sure that this assertion represents a statement of fact. I understand that Mr. Dirk Boerters made a statement to this effect. What I understand is that as scene 1 happened, radio traffic was between Brigadier Karlitz, who was inside Anyala at the time, and Lieutenant Colonel Vermaak, who was in a chopper in the air. I'm therefore not sure as to the mechanics of how this is supposed to have happened, as no other person made a similar statement to that effect. Now, can I take you to, is this what you were informed by the SAPS, that no other person made a similar statement to this effect? Yes. Right. Now, can you go to Exhibit Triple H8, the statement of Warrant Officer Masinya?
Behind flag 3 in your bundle.
Paragraph 12.
Is there a couple?
Yes, there's several. I'm afraid it's the last one in the bundle of Triple H8. Perhaps we should go to the previous page just so we can identify what was happening on the previous page, paragraph 11. Warrant Officer Masinya was one of the video operators who left the scene. He says, Captain Adria of Communication Services, are you guys from SABC? Yes. Warrant Officer Masinya replied, you're being identified as police spies. You should withdraw from this place as the miners said they wanted to kill you. Then he goes on paragraph 12. We then went back to the JOC. The shooting started. We heard this because we were listening through the radio at the JOC. So he heard the shooting over the radio, correct?
That's what he
That's
said.
what he says, yes.
That's what he says.
You were not informed of that?
No, I read this statement yesterday because
Yes.
it was part of the documents that you
Yes.
sent across.
But you didn't see that previously?
No.
And you've also seen, because that's one of the documents I sent across was Triple L9, the statement of Colonel Muhlmann. It's at paragraph 3.
Like paragraph
35.
On these documents, we haven't got page numbers. We have to go by paragraph numbers.
Yeah. Paragraph, do you have that?
Sorry, which paragraph?
Paragraph 35. It's about 3 pages from the end. And this is what Lieutenant Colonel Muhlmann says. She says, I remained in the JOC at the JOC during the afternoon. I heard over the radio that there was a shooting. To me it sounded like chaos on the radio, but I think I heard Brigadier Karlitz's voice. I heard shots being fired. And I think I heard Brigadier Karlitz's voice saying, ceasefire. I recall Brigadier Pretorius starting to dispatch emergency services. You didn't see that before you prepared your report either, did you? No. Or before you prepared your interrogatory answers? No. But if what she says is correct, then she too says that it was audible over the radio.
Yes.
And then can I take you to the evidence of Captain Kidd? Could we have the transcript of day 232? Page 29003, line 14. This is what, and Ms. Beloy, this is line 14. Ms. Beloy is questioning Captain Kidd. She says, you say you'd reached, before you reached your intended position, you heard about the attack on the radio, that the police were under attack. You hear that. What then happens? What do you do, if anything, after you hear this message? He answers, okay, when that happens, I start calling on the radio. I start calling on the radio. Brigadier Karlitz, the jock, Lieutenant Colonel's remark, I was calling just to get some response, but I received nothing. Ms. Beloy says, and what? And then Commissioner Hemraj says, sorry, what did you hear on the radio? Exactly what did you hear as regards the attack? And Captain Kidd says, Mr. Chairman, I heard commotion, the firing of ammunition, people screaming. And Commissioner Hemraj asks, and could you identify any person's voice making the report that the police were under attack? Captain Kidd, no, I couldn't identify any members. Chairperson, you hear on the radio that a volley was being fired, ammunition was being fired, and presumably you can tell the difference between rubber balls being fired from a shotgun and sharp ammunition being fired from an R5 rifle, can you? It's a different sound, isn't it? Answer, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. Chairperson, that's what you heard. Captain Kidd, that's correct. Chairperson, R5 rifle. So anyone listening to the radio would have heard that. Captain Kidd, that's correct, Mr. Chairman. Now, if Captain Kidd's evidence is the truth, then everyone who was listening to the radio would have heard the shooting at scene 1. Did you accept that? That's what he says.
If radios work and people are listening to them, yes.
Yes, okay. But anyone who was listening, he said, yes, all right. Now, did you know that when you answered the interrogatories?
When I spoke to Captain Kidd, and that's different from what he said here. When I spoke to him, he said he could hear the shooting just because of the physical distance. He never, when I talked to him, he never said that he heard it on his radio. That qualification is new to me. What I understood was that he could hear the gunfire from where he was approaching from the settlement that is on the southwestern side, where he was originally.
So, but you now know that his evidence is that you could hear it over the radio.
That's what I see, yes.
So the information which you had that no person other than Mr. Boertes said it was audible over the radio seems not to be correct.
That's correct.
Right. Does that affect your opinions in any way?
Well, of course it does. Of course it does.
Yes. All right. Let's move on. Can we go to page 3 of the interrogatory?
We haven't got page numbers on ours. Just give us the paragraph number.
Paragraph 1.12.
Thank you.
Before I go there, Mr. De Rover, let me just make clear what I'm asking, because I don't want to be unfair to you. I appreciate you were dependent on the information which was given to you. You weren't an eyewitness. And so you have no personal knowledge of what happened. You can only rely on what you were told. And so it's not fair to ask you, and I'm not going to ask you, do you agree that X happened or do you agree that Y happened? Because you don't know. You rely on other people's accounts. So what I'm really asking you is, if what so-and-so says is correct, that would affect your conclusions. I'm not asking you to say that what he says is correct. Or
Okay.
not correct. You're with me. Right. Now, paragraph 1.12 on page 3, you were asked, when you prepared FFF11 and FFF11A, were you informed that there was no POP input into the formulation of the stage 3 disperse, disarm, and arrest plan? And your answer was, to my knowledge, this assertion is not supported by the evidence led before the Commission, notably Brigadier Karlitz, Brigadier Tsilwane, Colonel Makubela, Lieutenant Colonel Merafe, Lieutenant Colonel Pitze, and Lieutenant Colonel Mere all had inputs into the plan and all have extensive POP experience. Now, when do you, from what you've been told, when do you understand that the stage 3 disperse, disarm, and arrest plan was formulated?
My understanding was that on the 14th and the 15th, the plan for Marikana in its possible outlines, that in situations that could eventuate, was prepared.
When do you understand that the plan for what would actually be done on the 16th was prepared?
Before the 16th.
Before the 16th. Now, if you assume for the moment that the Commission finds that there was no Stage 3 plan before the 1330 JOCCOM on the 16th, assume the Commission finds that, then that would mean that there had been no POP input into the plan. Do you accept that?
Well, look, if you put that time constraint, you're presenting a physical impossibility to consult.
And,
so,
and that would affect your opinion as to the planning of the operation.
But logically, yes.
Yes, I accept that. That's fair enough. It's for the Commission to decide whether that is or isn't the
No,
factual
but
case.
what I want to maybe to give a little bit more context, and if that's not pleasing, please stop me doing so, but on an operation of this kind, I would expect a police force to do the alpha and the omega. Like, you don't plan half of it and hope that half of it will suffice, and if you need more, that you are going to go back and envisage what other eventualities could occur. So I would be surprised if a plan indeed, to complete it to phases 3, 4, 5, and 6 was only thought of at 1:30 on the 16th. That would be a serious worry.
Well, the Commission will make its own findings as to what was planned when, and I don't want to debate that with you. That's
Sure.
not fair to you or appropriate.
Okay.
Then, when you...
Have you read all of Colonel Scott's evidence?
Yes.
I see. So you know what he said about what happened at the one on the Thursday morning and what happened at the 1:30 meeting. Yeah, I see.
Now, can I relate it to that? At paragraph 1.11 of the evidence leaders' interrogatories, you were asked, when you prepared F11 and F11A, were you informed that when just before 1:30 on 16 August, the Provincial Commissioner made the decision referred to in 1.9, that's to put it into operation, there was no written plan for the Stage 3 disperse, disarm, and arrest operation, and your answer is yes. I also understand that disperse, disarm, and arrest are standard operational procedures that do not require a written plan. My appreciation is that the plan that existed at Marikana does provide the breakdown of the different stages. Disperse, disarm, and arrest are common POP terms referring to common tactical options available to POP, known and understood and regularly practiced and applied by POP members. There is no need for those terms to be further clarified or detailed in writing beyond their indication as forming part of Stage 3 of the plan. Now, so as I understand your response, the disperse, disarm, arrest plan was so familiar to POP members as part of their routine that as a practical matter there was no need for a written plan.
Yeah, I'd take that. If I think I just take the number of public order incidents that happen in this country on an annual basis, then I would expect them, just on the basis and force of that number, to be very familiar, given that in their approach there is a limited number of tactical options available to them.
Now, can we go to the statement of Lieutenant Colonel Scott? It's Triple G 39. Triple G 39. Sorry. Could we go to Lieutenant Colonel Scott's statement, Triple G 39, paragraph 6. It's a long paragraph, but I do need to read it. He says, finally, I want to add that in my 20 years at the South African Police Services, 19 of which in the Special Task Force, I'm not aware that the SAPS has never, I think he means has ever, been confronted with a situation of the kind with which members were confronted on the ground on 16 August 2012. The plan or strategy that I prepared and proposed for adoption by the JOCCOM was the first of its kind. Neither the crowd management strategies for which Standing Order 262 provides, nor the hostage management strategies were appropriate in isolation. I thus had to devise what I considered at the time to be an appropriate plan for an unprecedented situation, being one which had to encompass the principles of Standing Order 262, but moving beyond the restrictions of the Standing Order to effectively plan for the disarming of the protesters while considering the protection of the police officials and the community in the area when dealing with a belligerent armed group numbering up to 3,000 persons who were choosing to contest the request to disperse and or disarm, demonstrating a clear defiance towards the law and the enforcers of the law with aggressive action should they be approached, as determined on Monday 13th August 2012. Now, Colonel Scott doesn't seem to have regarded this as a normal operation which required no special planning. Do you note that?
I think that his statement is probably a reflection of his particular brand of knowledge. It doesn't take away of the reality that disperse, disarm and arrest are known concepts to POP, that when you consider POP, do not require that detailed explanation. They might have needed it for Colonel Scott, but definitely not for POP.
This was an operation involving multiple forces. It was, according to Colonel Scott, an unprecedented operation as far as his experience went.
Yes.
Surely that required a plan, a proper plan in advance. You couldn't just say, just go and disperse, disarm and arrest, because it was a multiple plan involving multiple parties in an unprecedented situation. Surely that required a proper written plan.
The responsibilities of the different units are contained in the plan. And I'm only saying that where you ask me the question on stage 3, disperse, disarm and arrest, whether you need to spell that out for the units that are supposed to initially do that, my answer is no, you don't have to do that.
Do you think for an operation of this kind there was a need for a written plan communicated to all of the different units?
Of course there is a need for a written plan. The thing is, I think that you can't plan for the unimaginable. You are trying to find somewhere now in the process a development, a situation or a decision that can be held as the key point on, if you hadn't done that, this wouldn't have happened. And I think that the plan as it stood, the base idea, is obviously born from experience, from doctrine, and from the availability of resources on a point. And I see in the sequencing of what happened, it's not hard to identify the moments where you can say, if you hadn't done this, that wouldn't have happened. But my problem is much more with whether you could actually foresee that development.
Mr. De Rover, my question was this. For an operation of this kind involving multiple forces, and according to Colonel Scott, an unprecedented operation, was there a need for a written plan?
Of course.
Right. Now, and the plan must cater for a variety of contingencies. You plan for the best case and the worst case scenarios.
Yes.
Yes. And that's what the plan needed to provide for, correct?
It needs to provide for these contingencies of best and worst case, and that needs to be accompanied with a probability estimate.
Yes, indeed. Right. Have you seen such a plan?
I have seen the plan that SABC had available and the contingencies that they planned for.
All right. Well, and in your opinion, did it meet the requirements of a plan which informs the different units of what they're going to do, and which deals with the best case scenarios and the worst case scenarios and for contingencies?
I've seen better plans and I've seen worse plans.
No, that's not the question, Mr. De Rover. The question is, was it a plan, was it an adequate plan?
For me, it was an adequate plan.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to leave shortly, but can you make available to the Commission the plan which you say met those requirements adequately?
Sorry?
Can you during the course of the day, identify which is the plan which you saw, which you say met the requirements adequately, and make it available to identify it for the benefit of the Commission? Right. Now, let me move on to a different subject.
You can do it overnight if you like, so you may be busy all day.
Yes, we'll do that overnight, because I think
we
you are going to be
here
busy
until
today.
lunchtime tomorrow, so you can do it overnight, give it to us tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Chair.
Together, I don't know whether the lessons that we were going to get...
I'm coming to that, Chair.
Oh, you come.
Two other matters I'd like to address with you, Mr. De Rover. Firstly, can you go to paragraph 1.3 of your of the evidence leaders' interrogatories? The question was asked, when you prepared FFF11 and FFF11A, were you informed that the decision was endorsed by an extraordinary session on the evening of 15 August 2012 of most of the members of the National Management Forum? And your answer is yes, I was aware of the recording in the minutes of the extraordinary session held on 15 August 2012, that the session endorsed the decision that the strikers be disarmed if they do not do so voluntarily. Now, did you know of that when you produced FFF11? That was on the 8th of March 2013.
Yes.
Had you seen the minutes by that
No.
time? When did you see the minutes?
I have not seen the minutes.
Who told you about the extraordinary session of the NMF before the 8th of March 2013?
You'll have to accept that I honestly cannot remember. I know that somebody from SABC told me, but I cannot recall who.
No, of course I accept that. But somebody in SABC who was briefing you thought that the matter was sufficiently important to tell you of the meeting.
It wasn't even like that. I remember being at a place for a meeting and meeting a third person just for the first time there, and who in conversation over a coffee divulged that information, and it was new to me.
Who was this third person?
That's what I said. I can't remember, but I remember that somebody told me that story, and I took that back to General Annandale and General Mbombo, and just to ascertain what had actually happened.
And they told you what had happened?
Yeah.
Would it surprise you if I told you that the Commission you were told that before the Commission was told that?
Sorry?
Would it surprise you if I told you that you were told given this information before the Commission was given the information?
I'm not aware of that. If that's true, then I agree, or I share your surprise, but I don't know.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. De Rover, when General Annandale was giving evidence, he was asked about what was wrong, what had gone wrong at Marikana from an SAPS perspective. I think you'll remember that. I think quite a few of us asked him about that, but including Mr. Berger. And he said that the SAPS would produce a statement setting out the lessons learned from Marikana. And then on the 23rd of January, let's go there. Could we have day 173? So that first reference was on in 15 May 2013. Then if we go to day 173, page 20442, could we go to line 11? Where the chairperson says the following, the chairperson says the following, before he answers, I must say Mr. Semenya undertook some time ago, in response to a question we asked him, to provide us with a document setting out what lessons the police consider they've learned and what steps they are taking, because I said it wasn't any good to wait till our report comes out, because incidents may happen before the report comes out. And Mr. Mpofu says that's the issue. The chairperson says he said they were aware of that and they were preparing a document. So perhaps before the Brigadier answers, we can ask Mr. Semenya what progress he can report in that regard, in regard to that document. And Mr. Semenya says, Chair, I've also made inquiries yesterday with client, and I'm told Mr. De Rover is working on it. And then to the next page, Chairperson, thank you. So do you know when we're likely to get it? And Mr. Semenya says, my instructions yesterday, so that would have been on the 22nd of January 2014, were that they made contact with Mr. De Rover to establish the timelines for that report to be here. Now, is it correct that you were requested to prepare such a report?
I was never requested to prepare a report. From when I came, I think one of the first things that I did was talk to the National Commissioner and point out to her that if we just take it as a sequential occurrence of circumstances that produce this result, the least SABC should try to do is alter enough in its methods of operations to stop a similar occurrence from simply happening again. Because while we are trying to establish what went wrong, how it went wrong, and why, it's important to recognize that if outside world stays exactly as it is, such things can simply produce again, and that is a big concern. So I've pushed them on that.
No,
Let me maybe complete the answer. I was never asked to prepare the report on lessons learned. I approached lessons learned. I get, and that is my reading of the responses I got in meetings where I tried to push this point. They equate lessons learned with mistakes made, rather than saying, I have an experience and I learn from that experience. And whether that was a good experience or a bad experience, I seek to further the learning organization model, and I seek to improve my professional practices. And I think there has been a genuine reticence on that perception of lesson learned equals mistake made, for them to be as forthcoming as you would have wanted them to be.
Could we just go back to the previous page, 20442? Down to line 21. Let's just read again, or line 20. Let's just read again, line 19. The chairperson says, he said they were aware of that and they were preparing a document. Perhaps before the Brigadier answers, we can ask Mr. Semenya what progress he can report in regard to that document. And Mr. Semenya says, Chair, I have also made inquiries yesterday with clients, and I am told Mr. De Rover is working on it. What your evidence means is that what Mr. Semenya was told was not correct, because you were not working on the report, because you'd never been asked to produce such a report.
What I'm saying to you is I was never asked to write the physical report. I engaged at several moments in time, including before and following this intervention, because I remember it, with the SABC members concerned. But you will appreciate that the only ones that can produce such a document are the people that were involved in that operation, and they are the ones that should be doing it.
Well, indeed, I'd respectfully agree. It doesn't help for you to tell them the lessons they learned. They must decide what the lessons they learned.
Yeah.
That would have been my question.
Yes.
But my point is that Mr. Semenya was told, I'm sure he was told, that you were preparing a report in that regard and that they'd been in contact with you. What he was told was not correct.
I think what he was told was incomplete.
Not just incomplete, it's not correct. You weren't preparing a report on lessons learned.
Okay, if you want to read it in the strict sense that I was apparently the one who was writing the report, that is wrong. That is not correct.
Yes.
Mr. De Rover, did you suggest that such a report be compiled?
From the very early days, and that's why I'm saying to you, in many of the meetings where I sat, and I've never voiced it back to them to check whether what I sensed was true, but I felt there was that equation of a lesson learned is a mistake made, and not a more positive approach that when you conduct any operation of any kind, whether successful or not, you try and draw from that operation the positive and negative points that facilitate the learning organization experience, so that you retain that what was good and that you seek to remedy that what went wrong.
If you've already suggested or pointed out some of the lessons you think that might have been learned, it's still open for such a document to be drawn up without too much trouble, isn't it?
I'm aware that a draft document exists and is in circulation for commentary. So I don't know at what stage that will be put forward to you.
If I may say, if ever.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry, you. Were you contacted in January of this year to establish the timelines for the report in relation to the lessons learned? Were you contacted? Let me ask the question more precision. Were you contacted in January this year by people from the SABC to establish the timelines for the report in relation to the lessons learned?
I was contacted. I would have to check whether that was in January, and I've pushed the organization into this introspection exercise that they needed to conduct. And I know that sessions have been held in Potchefstroom, that different actors have been brought together, and that on the basis of these meetings, a document has been produced.
See, my question was whether you were contacted in order to establish the timelines for such a report.
No, because I think SABC has throughout, also in its dealings with me, very much stayed master of its own time and calendar.
And is it envisaged that when that draft document is, will that draft document will at some stage be discussed with you?
I've seen the draft document, and I would hope that they would want to discuss it, because I've got questions plenty. So, and I'd hope that this document would be also made available to the Commission, because I think it would help, and it would help the recommendations of this Commission.
And do you think the draft document is almost complete and in a form that can be received by us?
Yes, but like I said, I would still have questions that the range of topics, like my main question at this stage that I haven't had a chance to give back is to terms of reference and methodology.
I said I'm moving off this point, Chair, unless there's something...
I must confess, amazement at this stage. Perhaps that's the wrong word. We've been asking for these lessons for a long time. It was reported to us, I can't remember if it was reported to us in the chamber or outside the chamber, that an undertaking had been given by the police, legal representatives, that we were going to get the lessons document was in the point of production. I seem to remember being told that it was going to be finalized last night. I expected to see it this morning. Is my impression incorrect? Was such an undertaking given to us?
Chair, my colleagues and I have had various discussions. It's been promised imminently on a number of occasions, but we haven't seen it yet.
Talk of Wednesday night, last night being finalized. Is that was something I remember having been told. I don't know who told me.
Not I, Chair.
Mr. Mendy, can you throw any light on this point?
As the witness indicates, Chair, we have seen a document that's a draft, and in looking at the document, as the legal team, our impression was that it is not addressing the issues the Commission is looking for. And the National Commissioner, in the meeting that I was part of very recently, instructed that that document to be produced by the Friday of last week. I have seen what has come out of that, and I still think there are elements of it which require amplification. Otherwise, it will be a document for document's sake.
Thank you. Am I correct in thinking there was mention, I think outside the chamber, now that you put it the way you have, that mention was made of last night, some finalization of the document last night. That's what I was told by somebody.
I'm hearing it from you, Chair, for the first time. No, I'm not aware.
Anyway, I don't propose making myself a witness in this matter, because otherwise Mr. Mpofu may wish to cross-examine me, and others may wish to as well. Anyway, let's not go there now. What you're telling us, you saw a draft, you weren't entirely happy with it, it wasn't adequate, is that right?
The document isn't dated, it doesn't identify authors, it doesn't set terms of reference, and it doesn't clarify the methodology. So I can go on, but it covers some of the issues that interest this Commission. And if I just take my interest as a professional in this field, it doesn't cover many of the issues that would interest me as a policing professional.
What I have said in the past, it was a matter of concern when we asked previously, what have you learned, what changes have you made? We were told we're waiting for the Commission. Well, that was perhaps, I'm not sure it wasn't entirely so, but it was perhaps an acceptable stance when this Commission was supposed to finish its work after 4 months. But the complexity of the issues that arose was such that it was clear that we had to get a number of extensions. And so again, I raised the matter and said, you can't wait till our report comes out because a lot of things may happen before that. Yeah. And yes, it was agreed that we're working on it. But do I now understand that they still haven't produced the document of lessons that were agreed on it? They're working on it. But so if there's a problem in the Marikana kind somewhere else tomorrow, they still won't be ready to implement such lessons as they've learnt from what happened in Marikana. That seems to be implicit in what's being said. Am I right?
Yeah, I would agree that however outlandish some of the facts that appear related in what transpired and produced at Marikana, they managed to get into a sequence and produce that result. Now, if you as an organization don't recognize that, if you can't suffice with setting out the responsibilities of others, you also have to look at your own organization. So SABC as an organization needs to recognize where it fell short of expectations that South African society can hold. And you need to act on those. And whether that is because people that are in charge are not subject matter specialist or expert enough to recognize that, I don't know. But the reality remains that some of these discussions that I have had, on a personal level, they are difficult. They frustrate because it's a misunderstanding of the purpose that such a document would serve, and that produces a hurdle that I haven't been able to get across.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr.
No, thank you, Chair. There is one brief last matter which I omitted. Mr. de Rover, you've done a fairly detailed analysis of the shootings at scene 2, where the different bodies were found and trying to explain how this happened. That's in your report.
Yes.
Have you done a similar exercise in relation to scene 1?
I think scene 1 throws up, I think you have plenty sources that allow you to analyze what happened there. And I can throw in my 5 cents worth, but on the facts of what transpired there, I can give you the opinions that I hold. But with scene 2, that is different. You have very little auditable and independent evidence. Now, I'm not purporting that what I have set out is then factually correct, because the thing is that I wasn't there, and people have rightfully pointed that out, and that's correct. SARC have pointed that out, LRC have pointed that out. What I've tried to do is, on the basis of having spoken to the people that were there, and if you will then, looking through their eyes, give you a sequential blow-by-blow account of what happened there. And I've tried to do it dispassionately, not to give a value judgment, if you want.
I understand. I don't want you, I'm not going to scene 2. I just want to understand whether you've attempted to undertake a similar analysis in respect of scene 1.
Yes, but I've not, like with some of the other aspects, I'm fully aware that you looking at me, you look at an expert for the SABC. I want to stress that although SABC have engaged me, I don't work for SABC. I'm not a fall guy or somebody who can be plied to organizational need or requirement. And it commences with reiterating, I wasn't at Marikana when Marikana happened. I have a reputation and experience that are based on professionalism and integrity. I can't lower my standards to suit anybody's narrative, and that includes SABC's narrative.
Let me cut to the chase, Mr. de Rover. I just want to ask you a question about scene 1. One of the people who were killed at scene 1 was a Mr. Tembinkosi Gwelani. Have you ever heard of him?
Is he the man who can be seen moving and trying to get up in the...
No, he's not seen in any of the videos.
Then I don't know.
Okay. Well, Exhibit B, which you have, shows where he was when he was shot and killed. Could you just, you've got Exhibit B, could you go to the last, Exhibit B.
B.
You've got pages 16 to 18, I hope, in your bundle. And could we go to the last page, to page 18, which is an aerial photograph? Right.
Yeah.
Do you have that? Now you'll see that scene 1 is marked, and then there's a marking of P. You see that?
Yes.
That's Mr. Gwelani, and the evidence is that he was killed by a gunshot wound to the head.
Yeah.
And you can take it from me, P, that place where P is approximately 250 meters
From scene 1.
from scene 1. Now, can you think of any basis on which it might be found that the shooting and killing of Mr. Gwelani was justified?
No, I would hold to you, and I've expressed myself on the use of R5 rifles in crowd control. That rifle has a horizontal carriage that probably exceeds 600 meters easily. So you fire that round, you aim it at someone who might be 5 meters away from you, you miss, and it's on a horizontal plane. You have to, in your judgment, account for another at least 595 meters of running distance.
So he's an innocent victim.
And you end up hitting an innocent victim, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Budlender, am I correct in thinking if I look at page 16 of your bundle, that's the sketch plan, Exhibit B, there is, on the more or less extreme right of the plan, there's a circle with, is that a P?
That should be a P.
It doesn't look like a P, but it is.
It looks more like a P, but it's actually P.
Yes. I see. And there's an arrow going down, and then there's a measurement 280 meters. That's where Mr. Gwelani, that's where Mr. Gwelani was.
That's where Mr. Gwelani was found dead with a gunshot wound
And
to the
does
head.
the PM report indicate that he died instantaneously?
Yes, Chair.
I see.
So
But-
someone... Sorry.
But Chair, I think also the witness, for fairness, must also be told, we have evidence of injured people that were carried.
Chair, we have photographic evidence of Mr. Gwelani's body in that position 2 minutes and 33 seconds after the shooting at scene 1. I don't think it can seriously be contended that someone shot in the vicinity of scene 1 would have been carried to that position within 2 minutes and 33 seconds of the first shots at scene 1. That evidence I can refer to. It is Colonel Buerter's triple case 16.5108. You'll see Mr. Gwelani's body in the position where it was ultimately found.
The witness now, I think, has all the facts that he needs, and I think you've expressed your views on the matter. He's an innocent victim.
I think that
you've expressed your views.
my view is I concur. An innocent victim. I can entertain other possibilities, but generally the one that appears the most logical is likely to be true. The problem remains that you'd have to go back to the actual person who fired that shot and establish whether or not they were justified in firing that shot. Because you factor in that your shot may miss, but at that point where the shooter is, can he actually see that person and take sufficient note of the risk
Yes, I understand.
that it poses if you pull the trigger?
I understood you to imply, I don't know whether you said it directly, I understood you to imply, and I'd be interested in your views on the matter if I'm wrongly thinking this was the implication of what you said, that you do not regard the use of TR rifles with this problem that you've mentioned, or this quality that you've mentioned, as suitable for use in public order policing. Would that be a fair inference of what you say?
That was, I think, one of the first, after being here, one of the first recommendations I made to the National Commissioner to withdraw R5 rifles from POP and to not permit them to be used in crowd control. And there is ample literature available on the use of military weapons in law enforcement context, and particularly there are rules of international law that talk about the use of assault rifles in a law enforcement context, and generally stating that it should be discouraged. Like, you can't say prohibited, but at least in understanding the risks these weapons pose, and I'll be more specific, that a 5.56 round fired at close range is virtually and per definition a kill shot. It doesn't even matter where on the body you hit, because if you strike, the problem is with the fact that the bullet on impact disintegrates because of the high kinetic energy it carries. It's designed actually for the battlefield, where the confrontation per definition happens at a larger distance, and you want to be able to engage targets from 300 meters out to 600 meters. And then after 100 meters, there is a slight deformation. And after 200, that bullet stays with the shape it has, and it produces a minimal wound cavity. But at close range, that bullet shatters on impact, and it produces horrific wounds. If you get hit on the arm, you're likely losing that arm. If you get hit center body mass, you get a wound cavity, from what I understand, to be 20 centimeters across. So your chances of surviving that are minimal.
And the ballistic evidence, of course, then doesn't help you to say who fired the shot, because the bullet is not capable of being analyzed.
Well, it's very difficult because of the disintegration of the round to do any ballistic comparison between bullet and rifle. So even if you have the cartridge, it would still be hard to establish a match between that cartridge and a bullet that you have found in a particular location.
Mr. Budlender, do I sense that you want to leave? Advocate Hemorrhage wants to ask a question, and so do I, but if you can give us a couple of minutes before you go.
Mr. De Rover, I know you've said that you've recommended that POPs no longer use the R5s, but at scene 1, the R5s was fired by the TRT.
Yes.
Not the POP.
Well, it's my claim on the use of the R5 goes to its use and employment in public order management, and to me, that's secondary to the unit that you bring into public order management. I think that if you take your legal requirements to apply potentially lethal force, the least I would like to say is that on the array of firearms that you would have available to inflict potential lethal force, the R5 is guaranteed deadly. So if you can differentiate again in applying potentially lethal force, you should put the R5 at the end of the spectrum that you would like to employ, and maybe start with a 9mm. And I'm not saying that a 9mm can't kill you, but I am saying that a 9mm shot with a solid metal jacket fired at center body mass, I'd prefer my chances that I would survive that as compared to being hit with an R5, because I think that in 99 of 100 cases, you are going to die before medical assistance can be given. And even if medical assistance is present, the catastrophic damage to internal organs are making your chances of survival very slim indeed.
Does that mean, Mr. De Rover, that you criticize putting the TRT with R5s immediately behind the POPs in the operation?
Well, you see how, that's why I call it unraveling systems, and I hope to get a moment to put that into context, not as an excuse, but as an explanation that needs to lead to recommendations on your part. The TRT were never meant to engage in the way they did. That much is clear from SAB's spoken intention and whatever you think of their written intentions in the plan. What you get is that where they were, they end up confronting that group of people, and all they have is that R5.
I understand you can't criticize them for using the R5s, because that's all they had.
That's all they had.
There is evidence, of course, that the POP people in out of every 8 POP people, one apparently, according to the evidence, also has an R5. So there you even have, according to the evidence, POP members, not all of them, 1/8 of them, using R5s as well. I take it you also feel that that should
Well,
be stopped immediately.
I could interpret that at least as having it as a support weapon. I've worked SWAT. We would have one member of our group with a heavier caliber as a support weapon. Not saying that that means you're going to use it, but it's a redundancy, if you want. That should things go really bad, you can answer. But the problem with bringing TRT into that equation is that the question for me that it turns on is, was it reasonably foreseeable that they would be forced in that position? And did they contemplate that that could occur? And if you have it occurring, the thing is that it then almost follows. You put them in that position, all they carry is that R5. So then it ends up being used.
But they do have sidearms, though. They do have 9mm as well.
Yeah, but I think especially if they feel threatened, if I'm carrying my rifle in both hands, I might have a sidearm, but it would require me to either drop that on the sling and go for my 9mm, but if you feel an imminent threat to life, you bring that rifle to bear because that is what your two hands are on.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Budlender, I gather you have to leave at 11 o'clock, is that correct? All right, so I think we'll take the tea adjournment at this stage.